Question. So the next question we're looking at in these common questions is, are the chakra and the Dan Tian the same thing? Okay, so the chakra obviously from Hinduism, yogic practice, and the Dan Tian from Qigong, Taoist teachings essentially. No, they're not the same thing, they're quite different. They're different entities within the body. They're as different as your lung is from your heart. You know, they both exist within the body, but at different places, different levels. So some people don't know actually, but the chakra actually exists within Qigong teachings. They're called the wheels or the fires. Sometimes they have a different name for them, the lun. These exist within the energy body. And the Dan Tian actually exist in yoga, in tantric yoga, and in Kundalini type practices as well. They're called the Granthi. There's 3 of them. They sit in the same location as the 3 Dan Tian, and they're called the Brahm, the Vishnu, and the Rudra Granthis. Now, these 3 energy centers in yoga, certainly within the systems that I'm involved in, what they do is they have to absorb a certain amount of energy from the body, and then they have to be refined. The prana has to be refined within the Granthi until they unlock the blockages that sit at that place. So it has some similarities to the Dan Tian theory, but a little different. I guess we could say the same, because the Dan Tian in Taoism actually build up chi and then refine it. Not that different from unlocking it. But the view is that the lower Dan Tian controls, the lower chakra, the lower few chakra, the middle Granthi controls the chakra within the chest, and the upper Granthi controls the crown and the third eye chakra, and you can't access the chakra until the work with the Granthi has been completed. And this is the same within Qigong as well. So the 3 Dan Tian must be completed and refined and worked with until you are able to access the lun, the wheels, which are the chakra essentially. And some traditions say there's 7, some say there's 9 because of the points existing outside of the body. So they're different things. They exist on different frequencies. So you could say that there's different gradients of etherealness, for want of a better term, within the energy body. With the most dense being Jing, I suppose, and then from Qi you have the energy body. Then, so in the Eastern arts, it's not like you have a body, then you have something else. You have a mind, you have a physical body, and then an energy body, and then a mental body, and then a spiritual body, and then a karmic body, and so on and so on. They talk about them as if they're the same thing, bodies, because they are still things that contain the potential for you. Essentially, you are experiencing life through these things. So the energy body is where the Dan Tian resides, a little bit further up towards the karmic and causal body is where the chakra reside. So work with the chakra, or the lun in Chinese, in Taoism, or the Hua if you're talking about the fires, it is very, very advanced. It's very, very difficult to do. So these days you'll hear people talk about chakra balancing, or I've seen like little Instagram videos of people say, hum this tune and think about this, and this will balance your sacral chakra or something like that. It's not actually the case, not at all. Every one of the parts of the energy body has a reflection elsewhere. So you will have mental qualities that are a reflection of your chakra. You will have physical components that are a reflection of your chakra. So the endocrine glands are the physical manifestation of the chakra, but they're not the chakra themselves. In the same way that the 3 Dan Tian have correspondence within the body, within the pineal gland and the hard solar plexus relationship, and in the lower abdomen it's actually the abdominal cavity and the relationship of the tissues in that area. So there's physical reflections of each of these centers, but they're not the same thing, in the same way that a shadow of an object is not the object, but it's still an aspect of the object. It's something that's related to it. So the chakra, even though you can work with the correspondences, maybe you can work with the reflections of them, you can work with your base desires for the sacral chakra and stuff like this, maybe root chakra, but it's not the chakra itself. To actually open and purify one of the chakra is so high level that it's beyond most people, It's like a lifetime's work to get to that. And sometimes when people think they've opened the chakra, far from it. They might have opened the nerve complexes related to it, or maybe something like that, but no, it's not open the chakra. They're very, very difficult to do. So it's interesting for me to look at the 2 traditions, because what you have in Qigong, in Taoism, is the Dan Tian and the lun, the chakra essentially, and in Hinduism you have the Granthi and the chakra. But it's like they emphasize different aspects of it. It's like in yoga they definitely talk about the chakra, but if you think about yoga and Hinduism, it's very God-based and deity-based, all these expressions of of godhood and things, and it's very, very sort of high level. So they talk about these high-minded concepts. Even at the beginning, when you're just learning asana and pranayama, they talk about these high-minded ideals. Whereas in Qigong and Taoism, they're a bit more down to earth, in my opinion. So even though they recognize the existence of the chakra, they focus upon the Dan Tian, which is why you hardly even hear about the Lun talked about. They refer to the things that are a lot more grounded. So that to me was really the difference between the two traditions. But essentially, a lot of the work is the same. People get lots of things like they're confused. Like people think the Kundalini is the do channel opening, and that's not the case either. Like the Kundalini awakening is a very, very high level thing. And again, I've met lots of people who have told me they've had a Kundalini awakening. I've never actually met someone who has had a Kundalini awakening. I've talked about people that think they have, but actually what they've experienced is a movement of yang qi through the nervous system of the spine, which essentially is a do channel receiving a large surge of qi. It's very, very different from the female, the feminine and masculine energy that you're wrapping themselves around this channel and the sushumna and moving up through. So I think there's a lot of confusion because a lot of what people attribute to the chakra and the causal bodies should be more accurately associated with the energy body, the Dan Tian, and those key channels and things like that, because that other work is quite refined. It's very, very far down the track. So no, the Dan Tian are different. The Dan Tian are bigger, if nothing else as well, size-wise. When you feel them, when you're at the stage of being able to experience these things through inner vision or inner experience, the Dan Tian are quite big, actually. Like even though they say in the text it's like a tiny sphere, a couple of sun across, Chinese measurement is sun, they are actually like the relationship of the Dan Tian a little bit bigger, but the chakra are definitely quite small in relation to it, like a fine point. The Dan Tian are to do with conversion of substances and energy storage and the housing of spirits. So you can almost think of the Dan Tian as like anchor points for things. Whereas the chakra are actually the way that the karmic and causal bodies are reflected into. It's almost like a little gateway between the causal realm and the realm of existence. So they are vortexes, spirals, little holes through which this comes. So they're a bit like in I guess in Chinese medicine they talk about a gateway, a men being a place through which something potential becomes manifest, like Ming men and things like this, Hun men. But the chakra are like the gateways through which the causal body, the potential of the causal body, manifests into the being of a person. So I mean, if you even look at that definition, that makes them quite high-minded things to work with. So no, different. They do exist in the same locations in some cases, but the chakra and the Dan Tian are definitely different. It was something I was confused about when I started actually at the beginning. We were talking about the same thing, and then just as time and experience went on, I realized that was not the case. Our next question. So, what is self-realization? Oh, okay. That's a complex one. So this question about what is self-realization? Well, first of all, we should understand what it's not. Maybe that's easier. Because these days you get a lot of people online, well, like myself, I suppose. You get a lot of teachers online and you read their bios, their CVs, and especially within the sort of new age spiritual scene that's not connected to any particular tradition. You get something where someone will say, I'm self-realized, or a teacher will say they are self-realized. And I used to see that a lot, and I thought, oh, that's quite a claim. And then what I realized by reading around and reading more about what they were saying about it in their descriptions, I realized they'd misunderstood quite often the term. And what they thought it meant was they had achieved realization by themselves. So they thought self-realization meant no one helped me, nobody taught me, I didn't have a specific line of teacher, I did it myself. So self-realization. You can see why they might come to that conclusion, but it's wrong. If they'd actually had a teacher, instead of doing it by themselves, they'd have realized that's not what the term means. Self-realization doesn't mean to become realized by yourself. It means to realize the nature of self. It's a little bit different. So if you are self-realized, what it means is you understand your reality of the nature of being, of you, of yourself. So people will identify with an external layer, a transient form of self. Some people call it mind, some people call it ego, some people call it identity. It depends what tradition you're within. But or the quiet mind within Taoism, Hotian Xin. But what happens is when people identify with a transient thing, then ultimately that full sense of self starts to manifest, and that's why there's confusion that you hear all the time within Eastern traditions. So what happens is people start to realize what the actual I is, like the experience of self, the experience of I. And what happens is they experience themselves from a further place back within their being, so away from that is transient towards that which is permanent. Some people call this the Atman, the soul within Hindu traditions, and the idea is that once the self is realized at that level, then you realize it's not separate from God or higher spirit or Brahman anymore. So the union of self with something higher starts to manifest. So it's a very, very high state to be self-realized, to realize the nature of self. But at the same time, it's different from someone who is awakened, because self-realized means I have realized the nature of self. Awakened means not only have I realized it, but now I've woken up out of that experience of the full sense of self. So I'm actually constantly existing from the true self. So somebody who is self-realized but not awakened, or somebody who's had that experience, but then sort of slips back, like normal life gets in the way, it can bring with it a great sort of insight to the nature of who they are. But there's more to do, An awakening means I'm shaken out of the full sense of self and I exist from that place. Then you have enlightenment. That's different again. That's like a further progression of this, a much, much further progression. And then immortality within Taoist traditions means something else again. So those two don't matter right now. But essentially what you have is, but there are strict definitions for them, People think they're vague, but they're not. So these four terms, self-realization, awakened, enlightened, and immortal, if you add the Taoist term on, are essentially four different states that you could kind of say are maybe enlightenment and immortality are a little bit interchangeable, but you could say they are a sort of step-by-step process. If you actually know what these things mean, literally, then you would understand a lot of people that say they're awakened, I've had an awakening, or I've had a self-realization, or I am awakened, or I am self-realized, or I am enlightened, who say that actually that's not the case. Often what happens in these arts is people have moved the goalposts a bit closer, so the terms have been redefined or undefined in some terms, so that these things appear very, very close. And it's long been my bugbear, or my question that I ask myself. I'm not annoyed with other people for confusion at terms or over-enthusiasm at the level of attainment or something like this. I just think, each to their own. But with regards to myself, I used to think, well, monks and ascetics and renunciates would go and give up their life and give up the family, and they go live in the mountains, and they'd be there 50 years, just chanting the same mantra over and over, or exploring the nature of mind, or studying the jhanic states to achieve a self-realization or an awakening or enlightenment or something like that. And so I always knew that, well, that's going to take a lot of work, and a lot of commitment and a lot of sacrifice to live that way. I mean, your whole life goes that way. And yet now what I see on the internet is countless people saying they've achieved these same states either spontaneously or on a weekend course, or because they've studied meditation in their bedroom for a few years, or whatever. And it makes me think, if that's the case, does that mean that people in the past, the ascetics and the renunciates, just had way less potential than people do these days? Were they idiots? Were they not so capable? I don't think that's the case. I just think that the definitions have been watered down a little bit, so these things are actually much further away than we think. These things we think are closer are actually much further away than we think. The goalposts have been pulled closer, maybe to suit modern people a little bit. So the self-realization is actually a very high-level thing to do. If you manage that, that's really good. Well done. Self-insight, I would say a lot of people develop before self-realization, which is kind of like, that's a new term, self-insight. I don't even know if it's an accurate one. But it's kind of like, I would say that's someone who's developed some kind of background insight to the nature of self, but not fully experienced it, It's a very different thing to experience it. So our next question. So these are common questions that we're asked over and over. So this one is, would Tai Chi work in a cage? That's the question. So would Tai Chi work in a cage? This comes up over and over again, and I find it really funny. I mean, if we take that literally, would Tai Chi work in a cage? If the cage is big enough to do your form in, then you could do the form uninhibited. If it was a smaller cage, you'd struggle. But I'm assuming what they mean by cage is like, you know, the arena, the MMA arena. It's a funny one, isn't it? That everything is judged these days by would it work in a cage. So, I mean, if we extrapolate that out, what we mean is, would Tai Chi work as a stand-up fighting art against someone who was studying MMA, I suppose? In my opinion, no. No, it wouldn't. I don't think so. I don't think so because you're training for different things. I think if somebody was, well, it depends. I mean, if someone did Tai Chi, I mean, the amount of hours you'd have to put in to make it work in a cage, if you're talking about that kind of fighting, because somebody who is training mixed martial arts is doing a certain amount of hours conditioning and building the body and getting hit and distancing timing, footwork, head work, hitting things, locks, takedown. I mean, that whole repertoire of stuff they're studying, which is really cool and very skilled. And a Tai Chi practitioner, I would say, is probably not doing that because the amount of hours they're putting is probably going into form and structure and push hands and qigong and all of that kind of thing. So I think probably most of their time is absorbed into that. So because of the emphasis of their training, no, I would say it probably wouldn't work in that arena. That would seem highly unlikely to me. I would say that if somebody wanted to make their thing, their Tai Chi work in a cage, they'd have to probably adopt the same amount of hours studying that kind of training. And the argument would be, would it be Tai Chi anymore? In theory, it would be. I mean, it could be. Someone who was very skilled at Tai Chi could then adapt and start doing that training and probably do all right. But then realistically, by the time they're good at Tai Chi, they're probably too old to step in the arena anyway, because, I mean, your career is kind of over. I mean, if someone's in their mid-30s in MMA, you kind of, you know, on a sort of professional level, you already start to question whether they can carry on for much longer, you know, apart from a couple of anomalies. So, no, I don't think so. I don't think Tai Chi would work in a cage. I think probably more of an important question is, why are people worried about that? I understand why people who don't do Tai Chi would be worried about that, because obviously they don't understand what Tai Chi is about or why people do it. So obviously they see something that looks a little bit like fighting, especially if it does some weird stuff like fudging. So that's what they want to know, like, to judge it that way. But I'm more confused by the Tai Chi people that are always worried about that. Because it makes me wonder, if you do Tai Chi, right, and you're always worried about whether it would work in a cage, did you never touch upon that amazing feeling that comes when you do the form and like when everything drops away and your mind feels still and centered and your body feels amazing, and then chi, like internal movement that comes through the inside of the body and everything comes to life. And I'm confused, because if you'd found that, if you experienced that, the transformation that it makes upon how you feel mentally and physically, I would say in the majority of cases would probably cause the question of would Tai Chi work in a cage to fall away, so it's no longer there anymore. But if that question is still there, if you're a Tai Chi practitioner who's insecure whether it would work in a cage, then I would say maybe you need to go deeper into your Tai Chi. Or perhaps you just need to recognize the obvious, that you become good at what you train at. So if you train for fighting in a sports arena, it's going to work. If you don't, it won't. Like, that's just common sense to me. It's like the old argument, isn't it? Like, which style is better? That used to be the old argument that used to go around in the 90s. That argument's gone now. Now it's, would it work in a cage? It's the new question. And in the old days, it was like, does judo work better than karate? Does kung fu work better than Thai boxing? And the whole argument was kind of pointless, because it should be, well, firstly, which practitioner is better? Secondly, what is the practitioner focusing on? And thirdly, why are you worrying who's best anyway? What an odd thing to give your mental energy to. So next. So our fourth question is, will Nei Gong cure me? I'm presuming that's of a particular disease. So this has just become a generic question, will Nei Gong cure me? So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask that. They'll come to a class, or Qigong, I suppose, but they'll come to a class, or they'll contact you online and they'll say, I have this ailment, I have this thing that's gone on. Sometimes it's something we know, like a bad back, slip disc or something like that. Or sometimes people will come with something really obscure that involves lights and headaches and body fluids and all sorts. And the question will be, will Nei Gong cure me? And I always try to tell people that the very fact that you're kind of focused on that probably means the answer is no. and then often not very happy with the answer. But part of the reason that is because really, if you look at what these arts do, I know you have things, you do have Qigong exercises. This is Qigong for the lungs, this is Qigong for the heart, Qigong for the liver. And I think they're okay, but I don't actually think that's how they work, not really. I think that the body is so connected together that I think to have a Qigong exercise that specifically treats the liver is unlikely. Like, you telling me that exercise only treats the liver and nothing else in the body, like nothing else is affected. This exercise only treats the kidneys and doesn't affect anything else in the body. That seems highly unlikely to me. I would say that rather than focusing on exercises that cure specific things, for the internal arts, for Qigong and Nei Gong, for me, it's more about improving the overall efficiency of the entire body. So this is how I tend to approach health. Like, to me, poor health means poorly efficient functioning of the body. That's really what it is. So if someone wants to get better in their body, the body has to function better at a higher level. So of course, the poor efficiency might manifest in different ways. But ultimately, if you look at most illnesses, even if you're looking at like a chemical or hormonal imbalance inside the body, or something's not functioning right, it's about efficiency, right? So I tell people, like, try not to come along and say, I have a liver condition, can I get this fixed through the Qigong? Because it doesn't work like that. Rather, what exercise should I do to fix the liver? Don't worry about that. Just come along and learn the art and learn the process and try to increase the efficiency of your body and your mind's functioning by engaging generically in the same process everybody else does, and then see what happens. Because the other side to it is, if I am focused on my liver condition, whatever it might be, swollen liver, hepatitis, whatever, I don't know, if you're focused on that, then it's actually almost a form of attachment anyway. So I'm not saying you should ignore or pretend the illness isn't there, but it shouldn't be your concern while you're practicing the arts. Because if I'm there going, right, I've got this liver condition, do this exercise till the liver condition goes away, keep going till liver condition well, while I'm doing that, I'm constantly focusing on the liver condition. So my mind is constantly attached into that loop of mind, self, identity, liver, mind, self, identity, liver. So that actually the condition can't shed anyway, because one of the greatest things that happens through these arts is, first of all, your body's efficiency goes up, and then secondly, you actually start to release attachments to things. Now, the attachment to an illness on its own is probably not enough to sort it, but the release of an attachment to it, plus the raising of the efficiency of the body, can be a highly therapeutic and medically helpful process. So you've almost got like a compartmentalization involved within your mind when you train, because if you've got asthma, and if you've got, I don't know, whatever you have, or that you're trying to treat, diabetes, I don't know, and you come into the class and you ignore it, then sometimes you might do something that's bad for you, especially in the case of a physical injury. Maybe you've got a bad back. You don't want to be doing excessive spine twisting, so you must be aware of the injury, aware of the problem. But at the same time, you must compartmentalize and shut that out of your mind, because you're not there to fix your back, you're not there to fix your liver, you're not there to fix your lungs, because as soon as you're caught in that trap, it'll never go away, because you're forming a kind of attachment. In fact, with Qigong, if you build more Qi, the Qi can actually feed the mind and make the attachment stronger. So in some ways, it can actually anchor that disease into the body. So Qigong is like a bit of or Nei Gong is a bit of a double-edged sword for that. So what should happen is I come along, and it's not I'm here to fix this. It should be I come along because I want to learn this art, and the byproduct of learning this art is it's going to increase the internal efficiency of the functioning of my body, and that's what I'm going to study, and that's what I do as an art form. And then sometimes, if the conditions are right, then medical and therapeutic change will take place, and things can get better. And I've seen that happen countless times. But I will say, if I'm in a class and I have two students, I don't know what they are. They're twins or they're clones or something. I got no idea. And they've both got the same illness. They've got these two clones. One's got asthma, one hasn't. When they both got asthma, and they both come in, and one clone says to me, I'm here to cure my asthma. And the other clone comes to me and says, I'm here to learn Qigong. What happens is they both go through the same process, both go through the same exercises. The one that just came to learn Qigong is more likely for the asthma to go away, because it wasn't their concern, they weren't focused on it. Whereas this one, that's always looking for the specific thing that's going to fix their breathing, or the specific exercise, or they're always worried about it, is actually forming a kind of attachment that makes it difficult for it to let go. So apart from very, very simple things, obviously, I would say that what was the question? Can Nei Gong cure me? It's hard to, yes, it does have the potential to, but it's not to do with the exercises itself. It's about the efficiency of the body and the efficiency of its functioning, and that's how you should approach these arts. That's what I always tell people. Sometimes people are disappointed with me because they come and they want to learn a specific exercise for a specific thing, and they say, well, other teachers have given me this thing for my diabetes, and other teachers have given me this thing to help with my headaches. And I will say that that's fine, all well and good, but that's just not how I work. Let's just instead try to build the efficiency of the body by consolidating the Jing, getting the structure good, building Qi in the Dan Tian, and building the elasticity of the body. And let's literally just go through the Nei Gong process and you know, see what happens.